The needle trembled in Sarah's hand. 3:57 p.m., 3 minutes until policy demanded she end a life. Charlie lay motionless in the sterile room, a German shepherd whose gray muzzle and scarred flank told stories no one wanted to hear. 11 years old, 6 months in the shelter, 0 adoption inquiries. Too old, too broken, too expensive. Sarah had injected 43 animals this year. This one shouldn't be different, but her finger wouldn't press the plunger. Charlie's amber eyes locked onto hers, not pleading, not afraid, knowing, as if he understood what came next and had already forgiven her. The door crashed open. A man stood in the threshold, graying hair, military jacket worn thin, eyes that had seen too much. He stared at Charlie. Charlie's ears shot forward. A low rumble escaped his throat. Not aggressive. Recognizing, the man's hand found the doorframe. Steadying himself. "That dog," he whispered. "I know that dog." Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. And now, let's continue with the story. 6 hours earlier, Robert Sullivan sat at his kitchen table counting pills. 12 white tablets arranged in a perfect line. Enough to ensure he wouldn't wake up. The refrigerator hummed behind him, containing only spoiled milk and bread hard as stone. 47 missed calls blinked on his phone screen, all from the same number, all from Tom Brennan, the only person who still pretended Rob was worth saving. On the table beside the pills sat a photograph, its colors faded to ghosts. A woman with dark hair smiled at the camera, her arm around a younger version of Rob, back when he could still smile, back before Afghanistan taught him that some memories don't fade, they just wait in the dark. Patient as predators, the pistol lay within reach, cold, simple, final. Rob's hand moved toward it when knuckles hammered against the front door. "Sullivan, open this damn door. I know you're in there." Tom's voice carried the bark of a man who'd pulled too many brothers back from edges just like this one. Rob didn't move. "I'll break it down. Rob, don't think I won't." The lock clicked. Tom had kept a spare key since Rob stopped answering calls 3 months ago. His friend stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. The pills, the gun, the photograph of a dead wife. "Get dressed," Tom said quietly. "We're going somewhere." "I'm not going anywhere." "Yes, you are. There's a shelter across town. They've got dogs that need homes." Rob's laugh came out broken. "I can't take care of myself. What makes you think I can handle a dog? Maybe that's exactly why you need one." Tom moved to the table, swept the pills into his palm, and poured them down the sink. "Maybe saving something else will teach you how to save yourself." 40 minutes later, Rob sat rigid in Tom's truck, watching Montana winter scroll past the window. Snow-blanketed fields that stretched to mountains he'd once thought beautiful. Now they just looked cold. Tom broke the silence. "After I got back, I adopted a mutt named Rusty. Mange-covered thing, mean as hell. Shelter said he'd been beaten. Took 6 months before he'd let me touch him." He glanced at Rob. "He got me through the worst nights. The ones where the gun seemed like the only answer." Rob said nothing. His hand remained in his jacket pocket, fingers wrapped around metal that promised an end to remembering. The shelter appeared ahead. A low building surrounded by chain-link fencing. Dogs barked somewhere inside. The sound made Rob's chest tighten with a memory he couldn't quite catch, something about desert heat and loyal eyes and blood on sand. Tom parked. "Just come inside." Look around. If nothing speaks to you, we leave. No pressure. Rob followed because refusing required more energy than he possessed. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over concrete floors. The smell of disinfectant and animal musk filled his nose. They walked past kennels of barking dogs, puppies, young adults, all desperate for attention Rob couldn't give. He was ready to leave when he saw the sign, Special Cases. The hall beyond looked darker, quieter. His feet carried him forward without permission. The Special Cases wing held the forgotten ones, dogs too sick, too old, too damaged for anyone to want. Their kennels lined a dimly lit corridor where hope came to die quietly. Rob walked slowly, Tom a respectful distance behind. A beagle with cataracts, a three-legged retriever, a husky whose ribs showed through matted fur. Each pair of eyes tracked him with varying degrees of interest or resignation. None of them reached him. A veterinarian in blue scrubs approached, her name tag reading Dr. Melissa Hartford. Looking for anyone specific? Just looking. Tom answered for him. She nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Take your time. These guys have plenty of it. The irony in her voice suggested otherwise. Rob continued down the hall. His leg ached where shrapnel still lived beneath the skin, a permanent souvenir from a war that had taken everything worth keeping. He was ready to turn back when light from a high window cut across Kennel 7. A German shepherd lay with its back to the corridor, gray-muzzled, motionless, except for shallow breathing. A tag on the cage read, Charlie, approx 11 years, scheduled. The word scheduled didn't need translation. Rob started to move past. The dog was clearly done fighting, just like him. Then Charlie turned his head. The world stopped. Those eyes, amber and knowing, eyes that had stared across desert sand while mortars screamed overhead, eyes that had tracked enemy movement while Rob's unit planned their approach, eyes that had watched 6 men load into a vehicle that would drive over an IED 60 seconds later. Rob's hand shot out, gripping the kennel wire. His heart hammered against his ribs. Memories crashed through the walls he'd built, heat and dust and the weight of a rifle. A dog barking, warning. A dog that had saved his life. Charlie stood slowly, arthritis making each movement deliberate. He limped to the gate on 3 steady legs and one that dragged slightly. A scar ran along his flank. His right ear bore a jagged tear that had healed badly. Battle scars. Rob dropped to his knees. His vision blurred. When had he started crying? Charlie pressed his nose through the wire, sniffing Rob's extended hand. Then came that sound, a low rumble. That wasn't aggression. It was recognition, greeting. The sound a soldier makes when reuniting with his unit after too long apart. Rob's other hand found the gate latch. His fingers fumbled with the mechanism. Sir, you can't. De Hartford started. The latch clicked. The gate swung open. Charlie stepped out slowly, his damaged leg dragging. He came directly to Rob, who had collapsed to sit against the wall. The dog's head lowered to Rob's chest. Rob's arms wrapped around scarred fur. I know you, Rob whispered into Charlie's neck. God help me, I know you. The clock on the wall read 3:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Charlie's scheduled death. Tom stood frozen, phone half raised to capture this moment, but respecting it too much to intrude. De Hartford watched with hands pressed to her mouth. Rob looked up, his face wet. This dog. I need this dog. Sir? He's scheduled for euthanasia at 4, the veterinarian said gently. He's been here 6 months. The medical costs alone, I don't care. Rob's voice cracked with an urgency he'd forgotten he possessed. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what forms to sign. Just tell me he walks out of here with me today. Charlie leaned his weight against Rob, as if confirming the decision. Dr. Hartford shook her head, slowly. It's not that simple. There are procedures. He's already been processed for. Then unprocess him. Rob's grip tightened on Charlie's fur. The dog remained pressed against him, steady as a heartbeat. I'll need authorization from the director. She glanced at the clock. 3:50 p.m. She's in a meeting until 4:15. He'll be dead by then. The words hung in the sterile air like an indictment. Tom moved forward, his voice taking on the commanding tone he'd used when they wore the same uniform. Is there anyone else who can authorize an adoption? Anyone at all? De Hartford hesitated. Sarah Sullivan handles intake and adoptions, but she's preparing for the euthanasia procedure. She's the one who... Get her. Rob didn't recognize his own voice. It carried an edge he thought he'd lost somewhere between the desert and his kitchen table. Please. The veterinarian disappeared down the corridor. Tom crouched beside Rob, studying the dog with new understanding. You really know this animal? I think so. God, Tom, I think... Rob pressed his forehead against Charlie's neck. The memories are broken. Pieces. But those eyes, I've seen those eyes before. Charlie's tail moved once, a slow, deliberate wag that seemed to cost him considerable effort. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A young woman appeared, her dark hair pulled back severely, her shelter uniform precisely maintained. She carried a stainless steel tray. On it, a syringe filled with blue liquid. Sarah Sullivan stopped when she saw the empty kennel. Her eyes tracked to Rob on the floor, the dog pressed against him, the gate hanging open. What's going on? Her voice carried professional distance. But something flickered across her face. Confusion. Recognition that didn't quite connect. Rob looked up at her. In that moment, neither knew they were staring at ghosts made flesh. Her father, aged beyond his years by war and grief. His daughter, hardened by loss and abandonment. I want to adopt this dog, Rob said. Right now, before that needle ends up in his veins. Sarah's jaw tightened. Charlie is scheduled for euthanasia. He has severe arthritis, requires expensive medication, needs surgery he'll never get. He's been here 6 months without a single adoption inquiry. The humane thing is letting him live. Rob struggled to his feet, Charlie moving with him, their bodies supporting each other. I have money. Not much, but enough for the adoption fee. It's not about the fee. Sarah's knuckles whitened around the tray. It's about reality. This dog needs care you probably can't provide. He'll suffer, die slowly, in pain, at least this way. At least this way. You get to decide when suffering ends. Rob's voice dropped. I know what it's like to be called too broken to fix, too damaged to be worth the effort. Someone looking at you and seeing a problem better solved with an ending than a beginning. Sarah's breath caught. The tray trembled in her hands. Please, Rob reached into his jacket. Pulling out a worn wallet, he extracted $200 in wrinkled bills, everything he had. "This is all I've got, but I swear to you, I'll take care of him, whatever he needs, however long he's got left," Tom added quietly. "I'll vouch for him. Rob's good for it." Sarah stared at the money, at Rob, at Charlie, who had turned his head to look at her with those knowing amber eyes. The dog made a sound, not quite a whine, not quite a growl, something plaintive and questioning. The clock read 3:56. Sarah set the tray on a nearby table. Her hands moved to a clipboard hanging on the wall. Name, Robert Sullivan. Her pen froze above the paper. She looked at him again, really looked. The gray threaded through his hair, the line carved deep around his eyes. The military jacket that hung loose on a frame that had once been broader. "Sullivan," she repeated softly. "Yes." Something shifted behind her eyes, memory trying to surface through years of deliberate forgetting, but it stayed just out of reach, like a word on the tip of the tongue. She wrote his name, address. He gave it, the same house where she'd spent her first 15 years, though she didn't know that yet. "You understand this dog requires ongoing medical care, that the costs could exceed—" "I understand." Sarah completed the form with mechanical precision, each word a barrier against whatever recognition tried to claw its way into consciousness. When she finished, she looked at Charlie once more. "He deserves better than a cage," she said finally. "Take him." The house smelled like abandonment. Rob opened the door and Charlie limped inside, nose working overtime to catalog years of isolation. The dog moved through rooms Rob barely remembered living in, investigating corners thick with dust and memories better left undisturbed. Tom helped unload supplies from the truck to dog food, bowls, a bed that Rob couldn't afford but bought anyway. "You sure you're good here?" his friend asked. "I can stay. We'll be fine." Rob said it like a promise he wasn't certain he could keep. After Tom left, the silence pressed down like physical weight. Rob stood in the kitchen, watching Charlie explore. The dog stopped at a closet door, sniffing the gap at the bottom. He whined once, pawed at the wood. Rob opened it. Military uniforms hung like shed skins. A box on the floor held medals he'd stopped looking at. Charlie pushed past him, nosing through the box until he found a photograph, a unit photo, men in desert camouflage, and in the front row, a German shepherd wearing a tactical vest. Rob's hands shook as he lifted the picture. The dog in the photo looked younger, stronger, but those eyes, Max, he whispered. The name came from somewhere deep, a memory surfacing through fog. "They called you Max." Charlie's ears perked at the sound. He pressed against Rob's leg, solid and warm and real. The pieces didn't fit together yet. Rob's memories of Afghanistan came in fragments, shattered by the IED blast that had sent him home with metal in his leg and holes in his mind. But he remembered a dog, remembered trusting that dog more than some of the men he'd served with. That night, Rob lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Charlie had climbed onto the mattress without permission, settling against Rob's side despite the obvious pain it cost him to make the jump. His breathing came rough and labored. Rob's hand found the dog's head, fingers working through coarse fur. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted to the darkness. "I don't know how to take care of you when I can barely take care of myself." Charlie shifted closer, his weight a reminder that some responsibilities couldn't be abandoned at a kitchen table with a bottle of pills. The second morning, Rob woke to find Charlie standing by the door, patient but insistent. They walked slowly through the neighborhood, two damaged creatures learning to navigate the world together. Charlie's limp matched the hitch in Rob's gait. People they passed stared at the pair, the grizzled veteran and his scarred dog, but neither man nor animal paid attention. They developed a rhythm, morning walks that gradually extended from 1 block to 3. Afternoons sitting on the porch where Charlie would rest his head on Rob's knee while Rob read or simply watched the world pass by. Evenings when Rob would actually cook, not just heat canned soup and share his meal with a dog who'd forgotten what it meant to go hungry. On the third night, Rob woke screaming. The dream came with sensory details that memory had mercifully blurred during waking hours. Desert heat, the smell of burning metal, his lieutenant's voice shouting coordinates, a dog barking frantically, then white light and a pressure wave that turned the world sideways. He jolted upright, heart hammering, breath coming in gasps. Sweat soaked the sheets. His hands clutched at nothing, searching for a rifle that hadn't been in there in years. Charlie was already moving. The dog struggled to his feet, limped to Rob's side of the bed, and pressed his head against Rob's chest. The weight of it, the warmth, the steady rhythm of Charlie's breathing, it anchored Rob to the present. "I'm okay," Rob gasped. "I'm okay." Charlie didn't move. He pushed harder against Rob's sternum, a technique Rob would later learn was called deep pressure therapy. The dog seemed to know exactly how much pressure to apply, how long to maintain it. Rob's breathing slowed. His heart rate decreased. The fragments of nightmare receded like a tide pulling back from shore. "You've done this before," Rob said, his voice steadying. "You know how to do this." Charlie's tail moved once. Rob wrapped his arms around the dog's neck and wept, not from fear this time, but from recognition of a debt he could never fully repay. This animal, old, damaged, deemed worthless by a shelter that nearly killed him, had just pulled Rob back from the edge of a panic attack that might have sent him stumbling toward the pills Tom had confiscated. The fourth day brought reality in the form of an envelope from the veterinary clinic. Rob opened it with hands that had stopped shaking quite so much. Inside, an estimate for Charlie's hip surgery, $8,000. Monthly medication, $150. Recommended specialized food, $80 per month. Rob checked his bank account, $1,247. He looked at Charlie, sleeping on the rug in a patch of sunlight. The dog's legs twitched in dreams Rob hoped were gentler than his own. In the driveway sat his father's truck, a 1990 model, maintained meticulously until his father's death 3 years ago. The last piece of family Rob had left, besides memories that hurt too much to examine. Rob ran his hand along the truck's hood. His father's voice echoed from childhood. "A man's truck is his freedom. Son, sometimes freedom means letting go," Rob said to the empty air. He drove to the used car lot on 5th Street. The dealer recognized the truck immediately. "Damn, Sullivan, that's your old man's pride and joy. You sure about this?" Rob watched Charlie through the lot's window, the dog waiting patiently in the passenger seat of Tom's borrowed car. "I'm sure. Best I can do is $5,000. Market's tough for these older models." It wasn't enough. Rob knew it wasn't enough. But it was a start. He signed the title over with steady hands. His father would have understood. The old man had always said there were things worth more than steel and chrome. From the car lot, Rob drove to the pawn shop on 7th. The bell chimed as he entered, and the proprietor looked up from his magazine. Rob placed his wedding ring on the counter. Gold band, simple design, worn smooth by years of wearing. Linda had slipped it on his finger in a small ceremony before he deployed. Promised she'd be waiting when he returned. She had waited, just not long enough. How much? Rob's voice didn't crack. He wouldn't let it. The proprietor examined the ring through his loupe. 1 carat center stone, good clarity, 1800. Rob thought of Linda's smile, her laugh, the way she'd hold him during the worst nights until the nightmares receded, the note she'd left before the pistol. I can't watch you die slowly anymore. Deal! The money felt heavy in his pocket, heavier than it should. He made one more call from the parking lot. Tom answered on the second ring. I need $2,000, Rob said without preamble. I'll pay you back. Every cent. Yeah, I swear it. Tom was quiet for a long moment. What for? Surgery for Charlie. Another pause. Then, you just said his name. First time in 5 years I've heard you care about something enough to name it. Tom, keep your money. This one's on me. Tom's voice softened. Linda would have wanted this. You know she would have. Rob pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. We all do. That's what you can't seem to get through your thick skull. You deserve to be saved just as much as that dog does. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Hartford reviewed the procedure, the risks, the recovery timeline. Charlie's age made everything more complicated. His arthritis meant healing would be slower. The anesthesia alone carried significant risk for a dog his age. I need you to understand, she said carefully. He might not wake up. Rob looked at Charlie, who sat beside him with that patient dignity Rob had come to recognize as a soldier's bearing. If I don't do this, he definitely won't make it. At least this gives him a chance. All right then, we'll take good care of him. The morning of the surgery, Rob drove Charlie to the clinic before dawn. The dog seemed to understand something significant was happening. He pressed close to Rob's leg in the waiting room, occasionally looking up with those amber eyes that asked no questions because they already knew all the answers. When they called Charlie's name, Rob knelt down. You've got to fight, he whispered. I need you to fight. I'm not ready to lose you yet. Charlie licked his hand once. Then he walked with the vet tech through the door to the surgical suite, limping but unbowed. Rob sat in that waiting room for 3 hours. He couldn't read the magazines, couldn't focus on his phone, could only replay every moment since he'd seen Charlie through that kennel wire. 3 hours where the world held its breath. Dr. Hartford finally emerged, still in her surgical scrubs. Rob stood so fast his chair scraped across the linoleum. He made it through, she said, and Rob's legs nearly gave out. The surgery went well, better than expected. Actually, his hip joint was severely degraded, but we've replaced it with a synthetic implant. He'll need physical therapy, pain management, restricted activity for at least 6 weeks. But he'll walk again without pain, with time and proper care. Yeah, he's remarkably strong for his age. Most dogs this old wouldn't have survived the procedure. She smiled slightly. He's got something to live for. That makes all the difference. They let Rob see him an hour later. Charlie lay on a padded table, still groggy from anesthesia. His leg was shaved and bandaged. An IV drip fed medication into his forearm. But when Rob entered the room, Charlie's eyes opened. Rob took the dog's paw carefully, mindful of the IV. "You did it, you stubborn old soldier, you did it." Charlie's tail moved, just barely, just enough. "We're going to get through this together," Rob said. "You hear me? Both of us. We're going to figure out how to live again." Charlie stayed at the clinic for 2 days of observation. Rob visited morning and evening, sitting beside the recovery kennel, talking about nothing and everything. He told Charlie about Linda, about the war, about the years of darkness that had led him to that kitchen table with pills and a pistol. "You saved my life," Rob said on the second evening. "I don't remember all of it yet, but I know you did. And now you're saving it again, just by giving me a reason to get out of bed in the morning." On the third day, they went home. Charlie walked slowly, carefully, the new hip still adjusting, but the limp was less pronounced. The pain that had shadowed his eyes had dimmed. Rob had prepared. He'd moved Charlie's bed to the bedroom, bought soft food for easier digestion, researched physical therapy exercises. Tom had installed a ramp on the porch steps. That night, Charlie struggled onto the bed despite Rob's protests. The dog settled against him, warm and solid and alive. Rob's hand rested on Charlie's side, feeling the rise and fall of breathing. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Rob fell asleep without the weight of pills or pistols haunting his thoughts. 3 weeks into recovery, a BMW pulled into Rob's driveway. Rob was outside, helping Charlie with his physical therapy exercises. Slow walks around the yard, controlled sits and stands. The dog's progress had been remarkable. The limp had nearly vanished. He moved with something approaching his former strength. A man and woman emerged from the car, both in their 40s, dressed in expensive casual wear that spoke of comfort Rob had never known. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" Rob straightened, immediately wary. Charlie moved closer to his leg, a low rumble building in his chest. "We're looking for our dog," the man said. "We were told he was adopted from Pine Valley Shelter about a month ago. German Shepherd, approximately 11 years old." Rob's blood went cold. "What's this about?" The woman stepped forward, her expression softer but no less determined. "We're Jackson and Patricia Morrison. We placed Charlie at that shelter temporarily while we dealt with some financial difficulties. We've come to take him home. You abandoned him." The words came out flat, final. "We did no such thing." Jackson's smile vanished. "We informed the shelter of our intention to reclaim him once our situation improved. That time has come." Patricia pulled papers from her purse. "These are the original adoption papers from when we received him from the military. We're his legal owners. The shelter had no right to adopt him out." Rob took the documents with shaking hands. Official military transfer forms dated years ago. Jackson Morrison listed as the receiving party. Everything appeared legitimate. "You left him there for 6 months," Rob said, his voice rising. "They were going to kill him. I was there. I saw the needle they were going to put in his veins." "That's unfortunate," Jackson replied. "But it doesn't change the legal reality. Charlie is our property. We'd like him returned today." Charlie pressed harder against Rob's leg, the rumble in his chest intensifying. The dog had gone rigid, his ears pinned back. This wasn't the protective stance Rob had seen when strangers approached. This was fear. "He doesn't want to go with you," Rob said quietly. "He's a dog. His wants are irrelevant." Jackson moved forward, Charlie, come." The dog didn't move. If anything, he pushed closer to Rob. "I've spent $8,000 on his surgery," Rob said. "Medication, care. I've given him everything, and we'll reimburse you for the medical expenses." Patricia offered, "We're not unreasonable people. We simply want our dog back." Rob looked at the couple. Really looked. Their clothes were designer labels. The Bimba was new. And yet they'd left Charlie in a shelter for half a year while he suffered from untreated arthritis and faced an execution. "You said financial difficulties," Rob said slowly. "What kind of difficulties?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern. It is when you're asking me to hand over a living creature who depends on me." "We don't have to explain ourselves to you," Jackson snapped. "Charlie, here! Now!" The command carried authority, but Charlie remained unmoved. A thin whine escaped his throat. "Get off my property," Rob said. "We'll be back with the sheriff," Jackson threatened, "and a court order if necessary. That dog is legally ours, and no amount of emotional attachment changes that fact." They left, the BMW's tires spitting gravel. Rob stood in the driveway long after they'd gone, his hand on Charlie's head. The dog had finally stopped trembling. Inside, Rob called Tom. "I need a lawyer, now." "What happened?" Rob explained. Tom was silent for a long moment. "I know someone. Veterans Legal Aid. Let me make some calls." The lawyer, a woman named Rebecca Chin, met Rob that evening. She reviewed the Morrisons' documents with a practiced eye. "They have a strong case," she admitted. "Legal ownership is clear, but there might be an argument for abandonment and neglect. The shelter would have records of Charlie's condition when he arrived, medical documentation of untreated injuries. Will that be enough? I don't know, but it's worth fighting for. Tell me everything about how you found him." Rob recounted the story. The special cases ward, Sarah's trembling hands, the needle filled with blue liquid, 3 minutes from death. "Sarah Sullivan," Rebecca repeated. "The shelter employee. Would she testify?" "I don't know. Maybe." "We'll need her. Her testimony about the condition Charlie was in, the abandonment timeline, the scheduled euthanasia. It could make the difference." The next morning, Rob drove to Pine Valley Shelter. He'd avoided returning since the adoption, afraid of what memories the place might stir. Now he had no choice. Sarah was in the intake office, processing paperwork for a young couple surrendering a Labrador puppy. She looked up when Rob entered, and something flickered across her face. That same strange recognition that never quite connected. "Mr. Sullivan," she said when the couple left, "how's Charlie doing? His previous owners want him back." Sarah's expression hardened. "The Morrisons? You know them." "I know they dumped a suffering animal and didn't look back for 6 months. I know Charlie arrived here terrified, malnourished, in constant pain from an injury they never bothered to treat." Her hands clenched on the desk. "What do they want?" "Him. They have legal papers. My lawyer says we can fight it. But she needs evidence, records, testimony." Rob met her eyes. "I need your help." Sarah was quiet for a long time, studying him with an intensity that made Rob uncomfortable. Finally, she said, "I'll get you everything we have. Medical records, intake photos, my own observations. And I'll testify if it comes to that." Why? Because I've seen how you are with him, the way you look at each other. That's not ownership. That's... She paused, searching for words. That's the kind of bond that doesn't happen overnight. It's like you've known each other forever. Rob's breath caught. The fragments in his memory shifted, trying to form a complete picture. Sarah Sullivan, he said slowly. That's an interesting coincidence. What is... My last name is Sullivan, too. Sarah's face went pale. She looked at him with new intensity, cataloging features. Sullivan's a common name, she said, but her voice wavered. It is. Rob agreed. He pulled out his wallet, found an old photograph. Linda and Sarah. Years ago, Sarah, maybe 5 years old, smiling in front of a house. This was my family. Before I deployed. Sarah took the photo with shaking hands, stared at it, at the little girl who was herself, at the house she'd grown up in, at the woman she barely remembered anymore. That's my mother, she whispered. Linda, yes, she died 10 years ago. I know. Sarah looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. The features age had weathered but not erased. Dad! Rob's world tilted sideways. The young woman who'd saved Charlie's life, who'd shown mercy when policy demanded death. His daughter, the child he'd lost contact with after Linda's funeral, when Sarah had screamed that he'd killed her mother and vanished from his life. Sarah, he breathed, my God, you're so... Don't! She held up a hand, tears streaming down her face. Don't you dare! You don't get to walk back into my life and... I didn't know. I swear I didn't recognize you. How could you not recognize your own daughter the same way you didn't recognize your father? Rob's voice broke. Time, grief. I've changed. You've changed. We're not the same people we were. Sarah sat down heavily, the photograph still clutched in her hand. I need you to leave. Sarah, please. No. You show up here after 10 years of silence, and suddenly I'm supposed to... Her voice cracked. I can't do this right now. Rob stood in the doorway, every instinct screaming at him to stay, to explain, to somehow bridge a decade of absence. But he'd learned something from Charlie about respecting boundaries, about patience. I'll go. But I meant what I said. I need your help to keep Charlie, that dog. He stopped, the pieces finally clicking into place. You called him Max when you were little. We had a German shepherd named Max. Sarah's head snapped up. What? You were 5, maybe 6. You loved that dog more than anything. Rob's memory, fractured for so long, began assembling itself. When I deployed, the unit needed K-Tones. Max was the right age, right breed. Your mother and I, we agreed he'd keep me safe, that he'd bring me home to you. Max died overseas, Sarah whispered. That's what Mom told me. Did she? Rob moved closer, careful not to crowd. Or did she tell you he wasn't coming back? Because those are different things. Sarah stared at him, then at the photo. At the house where a little girl had played in the yard with a young German shepherd. Charlie is Max. I think so. I know it sounds impossible, but the scars, the age, the way he responded to me, Sarah, he recognized me. And I think, somewhere in what's left of my broken memory, I recognized him too. How did he end up with the Morrisons? Rob's jaw tightened. Jackson Morrison was in my unit when I got hit by the IED. When they shipped me home with metal in my leg and holes in my memory, someone had to take responsibility for the K-9s. Morrison volunteered. He promised to take care of Max, and then dumped him at a shelter 6 years later. They used him up and threw him away. Rob's hands clenched, just like they do with so many of us. Sarah was quiet for a long time, processing. Finally, she opened a file cabinet and began pulling folders. These are Charlie's intake records, medical examination, photographs. She spread them across her desk. Rob looked at the images and felt sick. Charlie Max, emaciated, terrified, his hips so damaged he could barely stand. The intake notes documented old injuries consistent with combat service, untreated for years. Behavioral assessment noted extreme anxiety and signs of long-term neglect. The Morrisons claimed they were surrendering him temporarily due to financial hardship, Sarah said, her voice hardening into something professional and cold. But their surrender form lists no return date, no contact information updates. They signed away all responsibility. She pulled another document. This is the euthanasia authorization, standard procedure for senior dogs with extensive medical needs and no adoption prospects after 6 months. You were going to kill him. I was following protocol. Sarah's voice wavered. I've put down 43 animals since I started here. It's the worst part of the job, but someone has to do it. The alternative is letting them suffer. But you didn't, with Charlie, you didn't know. She looked at him, really looked. Something stopped me. When I saw you standing there, when I saw how he looked at you, it was like watching something impossible, like he'd been waiting for you. Rob pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos Tom had taken over the past weeks. Charlie sleeping on the bed, Charlie doing his therapy exercises, Charlie sitting on the porch, alert and content. This is what love looks like, not ownership, love. Sarah took the phone, swiping through images. Her expression softened despite herself. He looks healthy. He's healing. Both of us are. Rob paused. Sarah, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I wasn't there when you needed me. I can't undo those years. But Charlie needs us both right now. He needs you to help me prove that where he belongs isn't with people who abandoned him, but with someone who'd give up everything to keep him safe. I'm pregnant, Sarah said suddenly. Rob's breath caught. What? 7 months. My husband left when he found out, said he wasn't ready to be a father. She touched her stomach. I'm alone, no family, no one to... Her voice broke. I named Mom's death on you. I blamed you for not being strong enough to save her, for letting the war break you. But now I'm sitting here, about to become a mother myself, and all I can think is that I'm terrified of failing the way I watched you fail. You won't. How do you know? Because you showed mercy when it would have been easier not to. Because you saw something worth saving in an old, broken dog everyone else had given up on. Rob's voice gentled. Because you're Linda's daughter, and she never gave up on anyone, not even me. Sarah's tears fell silently. She left a letter. Mom, I never opened it. It's been sitting in my apartment for 10 years because I was too angry, too hurt to read her last words. Maybe it's time. She nodded slowly. Maybe it is. They sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down. Finally, Sarah gathered the documents. I'll help you keep Charlie. I'll testify that the Morrisons abandoned him, that you provided care they refused to. I'll do whatever it takes. Thank you. But this doesn't mean—" She stopped, searching for words. "I can't just forgive 10 years, Dad. I can't pretend everything's okay." "I know. I'm not asking you to." Rob stood. "But maybe we can start over. Take it slow. Let Charlie show us how." That evening, Sarah drove to her apartment and retrieved the letter. The envelope was yellowed with age, Linda's handwriting elegant and precise. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it. The words blurred at first through tears, then came into focus. Linda had written about love and sacrifice, about Rob's service, his injury, the trauma that had hollowed him out. She explained how PTSD worked, how it wasn't weakness, but a wound as real as any physical scar. She wrote about Max, about the promise that the dog would keep Rob safe and one day come home. "Your father didn't abandon us," Linda had written. "He's lost in a war that never ended for him, and I couldn't find the strength to guide him back. That's my failure, not his. Don't blame him for my choices. One day, when you're older, you'll understand that sometimes loving someone means letting go when you can't hold on anymore. Max will come home, Sarah. And when he does, that's when your father will remember how to live again. And be patient. Be the bridge I couldn't be." Sarah read the letter 3 times, her hand on her swollen belly, feeling the life growing inside her, understanding, finally, the weight of loving someone through impossible circumstances. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Rob. "I read Mom's letter. Can we meet tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you about Max." "About all of this?" The response came immediately. "Anytime, anywhere." Sarah looked at the ultrasound picture on her fridge, at the tiny profile of her daughter, at the future that suddenly seemed less lonely than it had an hour ago. She typed again. "Bring Charlie. I think it's time I properly said hello to an old friend." The courthouse was smaller than Rob expected. Plain walls, uncomfortable benches, the smell of old wood, and anxiety. Sarah sat beside him, her presence both strange and comforting. Charlie lay at Rob's feet, his service animal vest giving him permission to be present. Rebecca reviewed her notes one final time. "The Morrisons have a strong legal case, but we've got documentation of neglect and abandonment. Sarah's testimony will be crucial. The judge will decide based on what's in the animal's best interest." Jackson and Patricia Morrison sat across the aisle with their lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in an expensive suit. Jackson glanced at Charlie once, his expression unreadable. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. "This is a custody hearing regarding a German Shepherd, approximately 11 years of age, currently known as Charlie. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison claim legal ownership and seek return of the animal. Mr. Sullivan contests this based on abandonment and best interest. Let's proceed." The Morrisons' lawyer went first, presenting the military transfer documents, proof of ownership spanning years. "My clients legally acquired this animal and temporarily surrendered him during a period of financial hardship. They have since stabilized and wish to reclaim their property. Mr. Sullivan, while well-meaning, has no legal claim." Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence of the condition in which Charlie arrived at the shelter, and testimony regarding the Morrisons' abandonment." Sarah took the stand. Her voice was steady as she described Charlie's intake, the malnutrition, the untreated arthritis so severe he could barely walk, the fear that marked every interaction. She presented photographs that made the judge's expression harden. In your professional opinion, Ms. Sullivan, was this animal well cared for prior to surrender? No. Your Honor, his condition indicated long-term neglect. The hip dysplasia alone would have caused months, possibly years, of chronic pain. It was never treated. And the Morrisons' stated intention regarding retrieval, they signed a permanent surrender form, no return date, no contact information for follow-up in 6 months. They never once inquired about his condition. Sarah's voice strengthened. Standard protocol for animals in Charlie's situation, with his age and medical needs, is euthanasia after 6 months. He was scheduled to be put down the day Mr. Sullivan adopted him. The Morrisons' lawyer objected. The surrender form allowed for reclamation within a reasonable time frame. 6 months with no contact is not reasonable, the judge said dryly. Continue. Sarah described the moment Rob arrived, the connection between man and dog, the immediate decision to save Charlie's life despite having minimal resources. Miss Sullivan, I have to ask, your last name is the same as Mr. Sullivan's. Are you related? Sarah hesitated only a moment. He's my father. I didn't recognize him when he came to the shelter. We'd been estranged for 10 years. I haven't seen him since my mother's funeral. The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward. And yet you approved the adoption. I approved it because I saw something in how that dog looked at my father, like he'd been waiting for him, like they'd known each other before. Sarah's voice wavered. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. Rob took the stand next. He explained his service, the IED blast, his fragmented memory. He testified about recognizing something in Charlie's eyes, about the $8,000 spent on surgery, about learning to live again because a dog needed him to. The Morrisons say you've become emotionally attached, and that's clouding your judgment. The judge said, how do you respond? Your Honor, attachment is exactly the point. They owned Charlie. I love him. There's a difference. Rob's voice was steady. I don't know if he's the same dog I served with overseas. My memory isn't reliable enough to swear to that. But I know he's the dog who pulled me back from the edge when I had nothing left to live for. I know he's healing because someone finally cared enough to help him. And I know that if he goes back to people who abandoned him once, they'll do it again when things get hard. The judge turned to the Morrisons. Mr. Morrison, you served in the same unit as Mr. Sullivan. Jackson stood. Yes, Your Honor. And you volunteered to take responsibility for his K9 when he was injured. I did. Why did you surrender the dog to a shelter? Jackson's jaw tightened. We were having financial difficulties. The dog's medical needs were expensive. We couldn't afford the surgery he needed. And yet Mr. Sullivan, who lives on a veteran's disability pension, found a way to afford it. We didn't have the same resources. You drive a new BM, the judge noted. That suggests your financial situation has improved considerably. When did you purchase that vehicle? The Morrisons' lawyer interjected. Your Honor, my client's financial decisions aren't. They are when those decisions involve abandoning an animal and then reclaiming it once someone else has paid for its care. The judge's voice was sharp. Mr. Morrison, I find it interesting that you only sought to reclaim this dog after Mr. Sullivan had invested thousands of dollars in surgery and rehabilitation. What changed? Jackson said nothing. Patricia spoke up. We missed him. We wanted him back. In 6 months, you never called the shelter to check on his condition. You never inquired about adoption applications. You provided no forwarding address. The judge looked at her notes. Ms. Morrison, be honest. Did you expect the dog to still be alive when you decided you wanted him back? Patricia's silence was answer enough. The judge sat back. I've heard enough. This court yields that while the Morrisons have legal ownership papers, they demonstrated clear abandonment and neglect. The animal in question suffered extensive pain due to their failure to provide necessary medical care. They surrendered all rights through permanent relinquishment forms and made no effort to maintain contact or demonstrate ongoing interest in the animal's welfare. Rob's heart pounded. Mr. Sullivan, on the other hand, has demonstrated extraordinary commitment and care. He has provided expensive medical treatment, ongoing rehabilitation, and a stable home environment. Most importantly, the animal has clearly bonded with him in a way that suggests significant prior connection, whether through military service or simple compatibility. The judge looked at Charlie, who sat calmly beside Rob, his tail sweeping slowly across the floor. In custody disputes involving animals, this court considers the best interest of the animal. Legal ownership matters, but it is not the only factor. An animal is not a possession to be reclaimed when convenient. It is a living being deserving of consistent care and love. She brought down her gavel. Custody is awarded to Robert Sullivan. The Morrisons' claim is denied. Mr. Sullivan, that dog is legally yours. Take good care of him. Rob's legs nearly gave out. Sarah grabbed his arm, steadying him. Charlie stood, pressing against Rob's leg. Outside the courthouse, Sarah hugged her father for the first time in 10 years. You did it. We did it, Rob corrected. Tom was waiting with his truck. He'd organized something he called a welcome home party. But when they arrived at Rob's house, it became clear it was much more than that. Dozens of people filled the yard. Veterans from the local VFW post, volunteers from the animal shelter, Tom's family, the veterinary team that had performed Charlie's surgery, even some of Rob's old unit members who'd heard about the case through the veteran network. Someone had strung a banner, "Welcome home, Charlie." The gathering was simple but warm. People brought food, shared stories, made Charlie the center of attention. The dog handled it with dignity, accepting pets and treats, but always returning to Rob's side. An older veteran approached Rob. Heard about your fight. Reminded me why we look out for each other. No one left behind includes the four-legged ones. Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it, my Kate. I'd saved my life in Iraq. Dogs like that, they're brothers. Family. Sarah stayed close to Rob throughout the afternoon, occasionally placing his hand on her belly when the baby kicked. She's active today, she said. I think she knows something good happened. Have you thought about names? Emma, Sarah said. Emma Charlotte Sullivan. The middle name, it's for Charlie, or Max, whichever name you want to use. Rob's eyes filled. Your mother would love that. As evening came and guests began leaving, Sarah lingered. I'm not saying everything's fixed between us, she said carefully. We have a lot to work through, a lot of lost time, I know, but maybe we can try. Take it slow. Let me get to know my father again. She smiled slightly. And let my daughter get to know her grandfather. I'd like that more than anything. Sarah drove away with a promise to return for dinner later that week. Tom helped clean up, collecting paper plates and empty cups. You did good, Sullivan, real good. I got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You fought. For once, you fought for something instead of just surviving. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. I'm proud of you, brother. After everyone left, Rob sat on the porch with Charlie. The dog rested his head on Rob's knee, peaceful in the cooling evening. We made it, Rob said softly. Both of us. We made it through. Charlie's tail wagged once. The months that followed brought changes. Sarah visited regularly, her belly growing, her wariness slowly transforming into something like trust. Rob attended her prenatal appointments, assembled a crib, prepared to be the grandfather he'd never imagined he'd have the chance to become. Charlie's health stabilized. The surgery had given him years he wouldn't have had otherwise. He and Rob developed routines, morning walks that stretched longer as both grew stronger. Afternoons at the shelter where Charlie helped socialize scared dogs. Evenings on the porch watching the sun set over Montana mountains. Rob started volunteering at the Veterans Center, speaking to other soldiers struggling with PTSD. He talked about the dark places, the pills on the kitchen table, the loaded gun. He talked about Abdul, who'd reminded him that being broken didn't mean being worthless. Emma Charlotte. Sullivan was born on a clear spring morning. Sarah called Rob from the hospital, her voice exhausted but joyful. She's here. She's perfect. And she's asking for her grandfather. Rob drove to the hospital with Charlie in the passenger seat, both of them nervous in different ways. In the hospital room, Sarah placed the tiny bundle in Rob's arms. Emma, this is your grandpa, Sarah whispered, and that's Charlie. They're going to love you so much. The baby opened her eyes dark like her grandmother's and seemed to look directly at Rob, then at Charlie, who had approached carefully, his tail wagging slowly. Charlie sniffed the baby gently, then looked at Rob as if to say, another one to protect. Yeah, buddy, Rob said, his voice thick. Another one to protect. They brought Sarah and Emma home from the hospital 2 days later. Rob had prepared his house, setting up a nursery in the room that had once been Sarah's. Charlie appointed himself guardian, lying beside the crib during naps, alert to every sound. One evening, as Rob rocked Emma while Sarah rested, he looked at Charlie stretched out on the rug. The dog's muzzle had grown grayer. He moved a little slower, tired more easily. The reality that their time together was finite pressed on Rob's heart. Not yet, Rob whispered. We still have time. We still have so much time. But time, as it always does, moved forward. Sometimes the things we call broken are just waiting for someone who sees their worth. Rob was 3 minutes from ending his own pain when he found a dog 3 minutes from the same fate. Both were labeled too old, too damaged, too expensive to save. But here's what the world got wrong. Age isn't an expiration date, and scars are proof you survived something worth surviving. This isn't just a story about a man and a dog. It's about second chances we think we don't deserve. It's about daughters who learn forgiveness and fathers who find redemption. It's about choosing to fight when giving up would be easier every day. Shelter animals wait in those same cages, deemed worthless because they've lived too long or need too much. Every day, veterans sit alone wondering if anyone remembers they're still here. But love doesn't check birth certificates or count the cost of care. It just shows up, often in the form we least expect, and reminds us that being needed is sometimes the same as being saved. Rob and Charlie taught each other that the best years aren't always the early ones. Sometimes they're the ones we fight hardest to keep. Have you ever been saved by someone or something you rescued? What made you realize that second chances can come from the most unexpected places? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.